Hey, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to talk about code reuse in PHP. Before we do that though, I want to talk about what the problem is that we're trying to solve. We'll talk about some common package management systems. And finally, we'll wrap this video up with us actually creating a package of our own. So let's get at it. All right, so what is this problem that we're trying to solve? I got a couple of examples here. Here is the code for Zapple. It's at zapple.io. So it's a Laravel application, so you see your typical folders like HTTP and jobs and stuff. I always have a code directory at some point, and that's where I put my application specific code. When you expand this, you'll see things like utilities, and you'll see alert helper, or you'll see a CSV helper. And so these classes are little helper methods that I'm using in Zapple. Problem now is if I take a look at another project, like here's my trails, I will look at code and utilities, and guess what? There's an alert helper. There's not a CSV helper in here because I don't necessarily need it. But if I look at another application like maybe TechCasts, I go under app, here's code and utilities, here's alert helper, here's CSV helper. So you can see there's multiple copies of this code kind of floating around, and it's time for me to fix that. In the past, what I've done is I have these multiple projects open, and I'll just copy and paste the code from one project to another project. And yeah, that works, but that feels a little sloppy and a little messy. So let's clean this up a little bit. We're going to put all of our common code in a package that I can just compose or require into my projects. All right, so the common solution to this problem that we have is we must use some kind of package management system. There's a lot of package management systems out there, and usually they're tied to specific languages. So in the JavaScript world, you have Node Package Manager, NPM. In the .NET world or C#, you have NuGet. For Ruby, you have Ruby Gems. For PHP, the package management system is Composer. And so you can see Composer's website here, and you can see a description of it. It's a dependency manager for PHP, and that's really what we're talking about. It does a lot more than just the packages, and we'll kind of dive into those details of what exactly it does and how it works in just a moment. But this is the first part of the system, which is the package management system. The second part is the repository of packages, and so that is handled by Packagist. And so Packagist and Composer, they work together. What you can do then is you can add packages to your application and compose your application from reusable components. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create a package of our own, and then we're going to use that in our application instead of having all of that code just repeated. So let's talk about how Composer works within our project. And so within our project, I have a composer.json file, and you can see that here, and it's just syntax, it's just JSON. But one of the most important sections here is this require section. This is where I'm telling Composer, hey, I need this package, this Laravel Horizon package, and I need a version that is at least 5.3 or greater. So I can specify versions, and I can specify the packages that I need. In addition to these packages that are required for the application, I can also have developer dependencies. So for example, testing frameworks or anything like that. These aren't required in production, but I need them in my development environment. We'll come back to auto loading and some of these other configuration settings in just a moment, but let's talk about these packages. So we already saw, for example, this particular application requires Laravel framework. That's the package, and I'm looking for version 11.31 or greater. When I run Composer install for the very first time, it's going to take all of these requirements and it's going to freeze them kind of in this composer.lock file. And in composer.lock, it's pretty much the same information, but think about this file as specifying exactly what I want in my production environment or my development environment. It's kind of frozen in time. And this file only gets updated when I run composer update. So running Composer install for the very first time, we'll create this composer.lock file. And then in addition, it's going to pull down all of these frameworks that I need into a vendor directory. And you can see this vendor directory right here. And so if I open this up, I should find this Laravel/framework in here, and I will find it right here. So here's Laravel framework. Now, one of the challenges that Composer has, and it takes care of this all for us, is Laravel framework, if you open this up, has itself a composer.json file. And so if I open up composer.json, Laravel framework has its own dependencies. So these are all the dependencies that the Laravel framework requires. So for example, it requires guzzle HTTP/guzzle. And so somewhere in here, I'm going to find guzzle HTTP. And there's guzzle. And guess what? Guzzle has its own composer.json file. So I'm already kind of 3 layers deep into this, and you can see how complex this is getting. All this dependency management, Composer takes care of for you. Now, it may find conflicts sometimes if you specify, for example, at your application level. We saw that the Laravel framework requires PHP 8.2 or more. If I were to set this at 8.1, then Composer would detect that my environment doesn't support that package, and it will give me an alert for that. But in general, Composer does its best to try to find the packages that will meet all of the dependencies for all the different packages that you've got in their dependency tree. Now, one thing I want to do before we leave here is I want to take a look at what these packages look like in the code base. So they're in the vendor directory. And if I take one, for example, Carbon PHP. Carbon PHP is a very popular datetime helper library. So it's included in a lot of Laravel applications. We use it under the hood. But if I take a look at this directory, it has a subdirectory. And then inside that subdirectory, there is a composer.json file. There's a license file, a readme.md file. And you can see the readme here is pretty short. But then there's a source directory. And in source, this is where all of the source code for this library goes. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to replicate as much as we can this same kind of directory structure.